The thing is, I did not cut Mateo's food to make him small. I told myself I knew what he liked because I knew the safe order, the mild sauce, and the way he read menus like warning labels. 2 plates. 1 white napkin. No crime. Of course, Roman laughed before Cassia did, and that made the table feel easier. Then Mateo put his fork down, and last weekend stopped being mine. My name is Ingrid Holm. I was 38, and I directed admissions at a private school where parents paid large fees to be told their children were special in a controlled way. The thing is, I was good at control, and I called that adulthood because the other word sounded too cruel. 2 lunch trays. 1 laminated kids' menu. No crime in knowing where everyone belonged. The lunchroom smelled of orange disinfectant and pencil shavings when Mateo arrived with the lunch I had forgotten. My husband stood near the doorway in his work jacket, holding a paper bag from the bakery near our apartment and the umbrella I had left by the radiator that morning. Children moved around him in navy sweaters and polished shoes, loud in the careful way rich children were allowed to be loud. Years before, during my first admissions season, Mateo packed lunch for me every day because I forgot to eat when interviews ran late. He used to write small notes on napkins. Not romantic notes. Practical little things about soup being in the blue container or the pear being ripe enough. Back then, that felt like being known. Now he stood under the lunchroom clock and looked too prepared. Marcy Quinn was at the staff table with her coffee, watching him hand me the bag. She said later that Mateo had assistant husband energy, the kind of man who arrived with supplies before anyone admitted they needed saving. Of course, I told her not to be mean. Of course, I smiled before the warning reached my mouth. Mateo noticed the smile. Quiet men see small things because they do not spend their energy filling the room. He asked softly if something had changed between us. He did not ask in front of Marcy. He waited until I walked him toward the hallway where the school kept lost scarves and forgotten violin cases. He said I had been looking at him lately like every useful thing he did had become another reason to resent him. What he meant was that he missed me. What I heard was that he wanted me to soothe him in the middle of my work day. I told him work was heavy and admissions week made everyone strange. I said he was reading too much into lunch. He nodded, but his eyes went to the laminated kids' menu tucked under my clipboard. That evening, Nora Singh stood in the lunchroom doorway while Marcy repeated the assistant husband joke. Nora did not laugh. The donor courtyard behind the school always smelled like wet stone after the sprinklers ran. Parents liked it because it made the campus look old and expensive, even though the benches had only been installed 3 years earlier. The thing is, private schools are built on performance. I knew that better than anyone, and I did not see why my marriage should be the only room where performance was suddenly treated like a crime. 2 donor folders. 1 glass of sparkling water. No crime. Roman Bell found me near the boxwood hedge after the scholarship breakfast. He was Cassia's husband, though that fact did not enter the room first. What entered first was his voice, low and amused, telling me that I handled powerful parents like they were the ones applying for my approval. He said it where 2 board members could hear. One of them looked at me again after Roman said it, as if he had pointed a small light in my direction. Mateo praised me too, but usually while putting petrol in the car or checking if I had eaten. Roman's admiration had witnesses. That was the first difference, though I pretended it was not. Roman worked as a donor consultant for families trying to polish their way into schools like ours. He was 42, married to Cassia, father to 2 boys, and careful in a way that looked like charm if you wanted it to. I wanted it to. He asked if he could send me a few thoughts about the scholarship event. My work email was printed on every program. It was on the donor packet in his hand. Still, when he asked where to send the notes, I gave him my personal number. My thumb moved before my better sense had time to dress itself. Nora was near the cloakroom shelves with a stack of visitor badges. She saw the exchange. Her hand stopped over the badge box for half a second, then continued. Nora avoided conflict the way some people avoided open flames. She had seen enough families split themselves in front of school counselors to know that wrong things did not become easier when named too early. Roman sent the first message that evening. He said the board trusted me because I made judgment feel like kindness. He added that Matteo must know he had married someone rare. Rare. That word stayed on the screen longer than it should have. Matteo was at the dining table when I came home, sorting mail into neat piles. Bills, school letters, everything else. He had warmed dinner and put my plate under foil. The apartment smelled like rice, lemon, and the clean laundry he folded on the chair. Once, that smell meant home. That night, it felt like being expected somewhere. He asked about Roman's message after midnight. Specific and factual. He said he had seen Roman's name light up my phone while he plugged it in. He asked why donor strategy needed a private thread when the school had official channels. There it was, one named incident. One real question. What he meant was that something about the shape of it bothered him. What I heard was that my husband had found another way to check my pockets. I told him Roman was a donor contact and that parents did not stop being parents at 5 o'clock. Matteo said Roman was not a parent in my admissions pool. He said Roman was Cassia's husband, and that made the private tone harder to understand. I said he was making adult conversations sound dirty because another man had noticed I was good at my job. Matteo looked at the foil over my untouched plate. He did not remove it. He asked if I could at least keep school messages on school channels. He said it gently, like a reasonable request. Gentle was the wrong tone for me by then. My mother's voice still lived inside certain rooms. She had spent 20 years caring for my father after he lost work, and then another 5 telling me that a husband could become your oldest child if you let him. She used to say it while folding his shirts. She said women called caretaking love until they woke up and found they had adopted a grown man. I hated that sentence. I also carried it. So when Matteo asked for one boundary, I heard a request to manage his fear. I heard him handing me another emotional lunch bag to pack. The next morning, Marcy leaned against my office doorway with her coffee and asked if the assistant husband had made his little concerned face. I told her Roman had messaged after the donor event and Matteo was being dramatic about it. Marcy said maybe Matteo was used to being the safest man in the room and did not know what to do when someone else had oxygen. I laughed because she made it sound clever, not cruel. Marcy had been divorced for 8 months. Her ex had moved in with a woman who taught Pilates and posted about healing with too many candles. Marcy liked my sharpness because it made her feel close to danger without risking anything herself. She did not encourage me because she wanted me ruined. She encouraged me because my marriage jokes made her divorce feel less lonely. Cassia texted that afternoon about dinner on Saturday. She said we should finally do a proper double date because Roman had been praising my work all week. Matteo saw the name Cassia on my screen and asked if that was Roman's wife. I said of course it was. I made my voice light because lightness was how I placed a lid on things. At work, Nora stopped dropping by my office with tea. She emailed instead. Short messages, clean sentences, no smile attached. By Friday, Roman had sent 6 private messages, and every one of them could have walked into court of ordinary marriage wearing clean shoes. Nothing in them accused itself. Nothing in them apologized. On Saturday morning, Matteo asked if I wanted him to book the restaurant since Cassia had chosen the place. He said he remembered I liked the corner booths there because the windows faced the street. I told him he did not have to manage every detail of my life. He put his phone down. The reservation stayed unmade for 3 minutes, which in Matteo's world meant something had been placed between us. Then he booked it anyway. The restaurant had a private booth near the window, the kind with dark green leather seats and small lamps that made every plate look more expensive than it was. The table smelled faintly of polished wood and rosemary butter from the bread basket. The thing is, I trusted places like that. A controlled room, soft lighting, good service, enough noise around us to make every sharp thing sound like a joke. 2 menus, 1 white napkin. No crime in knowing my husband's habits. Matteo sat beside me in the grey shirt I used to like. He looked careful, not nervous exactly. careful in the way he became when he was trying not to give me another reason to accuse him of being heavy. Cassia sat across from me in a navy dress, her hair pinned back, her hands resting near her water glass. Roman sat beside her, close enough to look married and angled enough to look available. That angle mattered. Of course, I told myself it did not. The waiter handed us menus. Matteo opened his slowly, reading each line like ingredients could turn into small emergencies. He had always been cautious with food since a hospital visit years ago after a bad allergy scare. I knew that. I had sat beside him then. I had held the plastic cup while his hands shook. That was real. Still, that night, his caution annoyed me before he finished the first page. Roman asked what was good here. Before Matteo answered, I told the waiter my husband would have the chicken, mild sauce, no mushrooms, dressing on the side. I said he got overwhelmed if menus tried to be interesting. Roman laughed first. Cassia did not. Matteo's fingers stayed on the menu. He did not correct me. He only closed it and placed it beside his plate. The waiter asked if Matteo wanted to confirm. I answered for him again. I said it was safer this way. I said I had kept him alive for years. People say a table can go quiet. That is not quite true. The table kept making sounds. A fork touched a plate behind Cassia. Ice moved in Roman's glass. The waiter clicked his pen. But the small air around the four of us changed. Cassia asked carefully if Matteo had wanted something else. I told her he never knew what he wanted until someone made the decision less difficult. I said it with the soft smile I used for nervous parents during school interviews. Matteo looked at me then. Not angry. Worse. Alert. Roman said something about long marriages needing systems. He made it sound harmless, but his eyes stayed on me. I wanted that look. I wanted the room to see it. I wanted Matteo to see it and finally understand that care was not the same as desire. When the food came, Matteo's chicken had been sliced unevenly. The knife was beside his plate. He reached for it, but I reached first. I cut one piece, then another, and placed the knife down like I had solved something. Cassia's face changed by a small degree. Roman leaned back, smiling into his drink. I said Matteo preferred when things came in manageable pieces. Then I reached for the laminated kids' menu the waiter had left near the wall because some family had used the booth before us. It had cartoon animals on it and a puzzle printed in blue ink. I slid it toward Matteo. The thing is, I did not think I was being cruel. Not exactly. I thought I was showing the truth in a shape everyone could finally see. I thought if I made the joke visible enough, then maybe Matteo would stop hiding behind quiet helpfulness and become a man who reached for me instead of another small task. I told Cassia that I already worked with children all day. Then I said my husband was basically the third kid I never wanted. Roman laughed too loudly. The waiter, who had returned with pepper, stopped beside the table and then walked away without offering it. A woman at the next booth glanced over. Cassia looked at Roman, not at me. Matteo set his fork down. The fork touched the plate with a small, clean sound. He folded his napkin once. Then he looked at Cassia and said she had been right to send it. My face kept its smile because I did not yet understand which part of the room had moved. Cassia picked up her water glass. Her hand looked steady, but the water line trembled. She said she had not wanted to do it at dinner. Matteo said he knew. He said dinner had only made the timing clearer. Roman stopped smiling. Matteo turned to me, still quiet, and said Cassia had forwarded him the Willowmere hotel confirmation from last weekend. He said it had gone to the family email attached to Roman's rewards account. He said the booking showed Roman's name, my phone number, and the late checkout I had told Matteo was a school emergency. No one moved for a moment. Not in a dramatic way. Just the practical stillness of people waiting to see which lie would stand up first. I said it was not what it sounded like. Roman said Cassia had misunderstood a business meeting. He did not look at me when he said it. That was the first wrong thing he did at the table. Not the lie. The distance. Cassia said the hotel had sent 2 follow-up messages and 1 parking validation. She said Roman had already told her his version. She had wanted to see if mine matched. Matteo did not raise his voice. That was the quiet debrief. He said I had told him last Saturday that the school had a parent crisis. He said he had made me tea when I came home because my voice sounded tired. He said he had believed the tired part. What he meant was that he had not been stupid. What I heard was that he had been gathering himself against me. I said he was enjoying this. I said he finally had a chance to make himself the wounded adult after months of acting like my responsibility. Cassia closed her eyes for 1 second. Roman checked his phone under the table. A crack opened in me then, small and sharp. I saw Cassia's face, not angry the way I wanted it to be, but tired in a familiar way. She looked like a woman who had packed snacks, checked homework, carried a marriage through social rooms, and now had to sit across from another woman who had mistaken her life for an escape route. For half a second, I saw the table from outside it. My hand near the kids' menu. Matteo's cut food. Roman's phone. Cassia's wedding ring against the wet glass. Then I closed the door. I told myself Cassia was using motherhood to make herself look noble. I told myself Matteo had chosen this public reveal because he wanted witnesses too. Of course I told myself anything that kept me from looking straight at my own hand on that menu. Matteo stood first. He did not throw money down or make a speech. He took his card from his wallet, placed it beside his plate, and asked the waiter to split the check. Roman said he should not make a scene. Matteo looked at him once and said the scene had already been made. Cassia asked Roman to drive himself home. She said she would call her sister. When Matteo left the booth, he did not look back at me. Roman reached for his glass, then stopped. He did not touch my hand again. Our apartment hallway smelled like wet wool from Matteo's coat and the lemon cleaner he used every Sunday morning. His work bag sat beside the shoe rack when we came in, but he did not take it to the bedroom. He placed it near the door, straightened the strap, and removed his keys from the little blue bowl. The thing is, that was how Matteo ended things before he ever said ending. Objects moved first. People came later. 2 keys. 1 folded receipt. No crime, I told myself, in needing a man to finally speak. I wanted noise from him. I wanted heat. A fight would have given me a shape I knew how to push against. Instead, Matteo took off his coat and hung it carefully. He asked if I wanted water. That question made me angrier than shouting would have. I told him the dinner had gone too far. I said the joke was ugly, yes, but the hotel was being twisted into something larger than it was. I used a softer voice because a soft voice can look like accountability if nobody checks the middle. He stood by the dining table with his sleeves still buttoned. He said the problem was not 1 joke, 1 dinner, or 1 hotel. He said it was the way I needed witnesses before I would call him small. He named the courtyard, Marcy's assistant husband joke, the messages he had seen me hide, and the way I answered for him like he was not sitting beside me. Accumulation, not 1 incident. That was how he brought it to me. What he meant was that he had been living under a pattern. What I heard was that he had been collecting a case in his head like a man who wanted to win. I told him he had made love into tasks long before I made anything public. He asked me what that meant. I said it meant lunch bags, umbrellas, water, reservations, safe orders, and every other soft little rope he tied around my day while calling it care. He flinched at that. Not much. 1 small movement near his mouth. Then he took a small paper napkin from the table. It had come from the lunch bag he brought me earlier that week. 1 corner still had a grease mark from the bakery. He folded it once, then again, into a square. His hands shook just enough for me to see it. The room slowed around that napkin. For 1 second, I almost saw him. Not as a man asking me to manage his sadness. Not as a child waiting to be told where to sit. Just Matteo, 40 years old, standing in our dining room trying to keep his hands busy because the person who knew his oldest wound had used it as a dinner joke. He had told me once, years ago, after too much wine at his sister's house, that being called childish made him feel 14 again. Their mother had been sick then. He had packed school lunches for Layla, signed forms, walked younger cousins home, and still got told he was too serious for his age and too young to complain. He hated being treated like a boy because he had never been allowed to be one. The napkin became smaller under his fingers. I could have said his name differently. I could have stopped. Instead, I told myself his sadness was another job he wanted me to manage. I walked to the kitchen and opened a cabinet I did not need to open. Plates, bowls, a chipped mug. No answer there. Layla came the next evening. Mateo's sister stood in our kitchen with her hair still damp from rain and her arms crossed tightly. She did not shout. That was the Reyes family problem. They were calm until calm became a locked door. Layla asked if I remembered what Mateo told me about raising everyone too early. I said I remembered. She asked why then I had chosen child as the word to place on him in public. I told her she had only heard one side. Layla said she had heard enough sides when she was 10 and Mateo was making her breakfast before school. She said Mateo's flaw was that he turned care into work because work had once been the only way his family survived. She said my flaw was that I called every offered hand a leash. That line annoyed me because it was too close to useful. I told her she did not know what it was like being married to someone who solved everything except the feeling of being wanted. Layla looked at me then, and for the first time that night, her calm broke at the edge. She said maybe I was right about that. She said Mateo had never been good at wanting out loud. Then she said being right about hunger did not explain why I fed myself by starving him. After she left, I texted Marcy. I wrote that everyone had turned dramatic. She answered an hour later with a small face emoji and no words. The next morning, she did not come into my office before assembly. She waved from the corridor as if there were parents between us, though there were none. Nora stopped eating lunch near my desk. She sat with the lower school teachers instead. Her email replies became shorter, polite, careful, complete. Cassia sent another screenshot to Mateo while we were in the living room. His phone lit up on the side table. I saw her name. I saw the preview start with Willowmere. Mateo turned the phone over before I could read the rest. I said Cassia was trying to punish Roman through us. Mateo said Cassia had 2 children and a husband who lied to her, so maybe not everything was about me. That landed harder because it did not sound like him, clearer, less careful. I tried one more tactic that night. Controlled honesty. I said Roman had made me feel seen, but that did not mean I wanted to destroy our marriage. I said the hotel looked worse than it was. I said adults could make mistakes without being reduced to them. Mateo asked what exactly the hotel was, if not a choice. He did not ask for details. He did not need them. He asked because he wanted to know whether I would say the word choice. I did not. He slept on the sofa. Not because I told him to. Not because he slammed anything or wanted sympathy. He carried a blanket from the hall closet, placed his phone on the coffee table, and set the folded lunch napkin beside it like a bookmark. When I woke before sunrise, his emergency contact card was still in my wallet, but his work bag was by the door. That was not leaving yet. It was measuring the distance. The fundraiser prep room at school smelled of glue dots, printer ink, and the cheap coffee parents donated when they wanted to seem useful. White tablecloths were stacked on one chair. Name tags were spread across the long table. I stood over them with my phone in my hand, trying to decide who still belonged near me. The thing is, a room can empty before anyone walks out. People only show you later. 2 unread messages. 1 parent file. No crime in explaining my side before Mateo made it sound worse. Nora came in to collect interview folders. I told her Mateo was turning a private marriage issue into public punishment. I said Cassia had dragged the hotel into our dinner because her own marriage was failing and she needed company. I said Roman had become a convenient symbol because people love symbols more than facts. Nora did not put the folders down. She asked what fact I wanted her to hold. Calm. Professional. Not friendly. I said the fact was that Mateo had spent years making me feel like another responsibility on his route. Nora said that could be true and still not make the kids' menu true. The kids' menu. She said it like it had weight, like it had followed me from the restaurant and sat down in my office. I told her she had no idea what it was like to be desired only through packed lunches and safe plans. She said no, she did not know my marriage. Then she said she did know children heard tone before words, and adults did too. After she left, I messaged Marcy 3 times. I asked her to remind me that Matteo had always acted helpless. I asked if I was losing my mind. I asked if she remembered all the jokes she made first. Marcy reacted with only a thumbs up. That was all. One blue hand where a whole woman used to be. Roman took longer to answer. When he finally did, his message said Cassia was emotional and that the hotel situation was complicated. He wrote that we should avoid written details for now. Written details. That phrase belonged to a man protecting himself first. Of course, I told myself he was under pressure. Of course, I made his distance into strategy instead of retreat. That evening, Matteo came home before 6. He had shaved. He wore a clean shirt, and his face had the flat calm of someone who had finished doing difficult math. He placed his keys in the blue bowl, then looked at them as if he had made a decision about where they would not stay much longer. He asked if we could sit at the dining table. I hated that table then. Too many ordinary things had happened there. Bills, soup, my admissions notes, his folded napkin. The normal surface made the conversation feel stricter than a raised voice. He said he would give me one private chance, not because he owed me one, but because he owed himself the knowledge that he had tried without an audience. He said if I told the truth now, without making it about Cassia, Roman, Marcy, or his carefulness, he would sit with me once and decide what could still be saved. Final and clean. One real offer. No begging. What he meant was that the door was still open by the width of a hand. What I heard was that I had to confess on his terms before being allowed to remain in my own life. So I said the one true thing I had been carrying like a hot plate. I said he often turned love into tasks before he ever asked what I wanted to feel. I said he could bring lunch, book tables, check ingredients, repair umbrellas, and still leave me untouched in the place where I needed to be wanted. I said being cared for like a schedule was lonely. Matteo did not refute it. He looked at the table for a long time. Then he said, I was right about that. He said he had hidden inside useful things because useful things were safer than asking for desire and hearing no. He said that was his failure. For one breath, the room had an honest shape. Then he said it did not give me the right to turn him into a child in front of another couple. It did not give me the right to use the oldest thing he had trusted me with. It did not give me the right to lie about last weekend and then laugh while he sat beside cut food. The shape closed. I told him he was making himself noble because pain suited him. I said people loved injured men if they stayed quiet enough. I said he had always known how to look wounded without having to become interesting. His face did not change much. It only lost the last piece of waiting. He said he would handle things properly. No threat. No named plan. No raised voice. That was the threat. He stood, went to the hallway, opened my wallet from the small tray where I kept receipts, and removed his emergency contact card. The card had been there for years, folded behind my school ID. He placed it on the console table, not angrily, not carefully either. Simply outside me. I told myself it was drama. I told myself he wanted me to chase him so he could finally feel powerful. The thing is, I still thought loudness meant control. Matteo was becoming logistical, and I was becoming louder. I did not understand which one of us had already left. The next morning at school, I crossed the line before assembly. Nora was in the reception lobby with 2 parents from the lower school. Layla had come to drop off something for Matteo because he was staying at her place now, though nobody had said that sentence directly to me. I told Layla, in front of Nora and the parents, that Matteo had always needed women to organize his emotions. I said his mother trained him to look useful so nobody would notice how much care he demanded back. I said I was done being made into the villain because I finally refused to raise a grown man. Layla did not answer. She only held the envelope in her hand and looked at me like she had finally stopped expecting better. The parents looked at the floor. Nora took one step toward the reception desk and began moving files into a drawer. That public sentence should have fed the part of me that needed air. It did not. Roman stopped answering for 5 hours. When he did, he wrote that this was becoming visible and that Cassia was watching everything. He did not ask if I was okay. He did not say we. He did not say my name. At home, Matteo's side of the closet had gaps in it. Not empty. Worse than empty. Organized. Shirts gone in categories. Work boots gone. The charger from his side table gone. His toothbrush gone from the cup. On the sofa, the folded lunch napkin was still there beside the remote. He had left it behind. I told myself that meant he had not finished leaving. Then I opened the blue bowl by the door. His keys were not there. Monday morning at the school reception lobby smelled of floor polish and wet coats. Parents were signing late slips near the desk, and Nora was sorting interview folders into coloured stacks. The thing is, I had built my whole life around rooms where people waited for my decision. That morning, a man in a dark jacket stepped inside and asked for Ingrid Holm. 2 parents turned. 1 pen stopped moving. No crime, I almost thought, before my name reached the room properly. He asked me to confirm my name. I did. He handed me a thick envelope and asked me to sign. My hand wrote my name too large on the small screen. Then I stood there holding the envelope while Nora looked from the man to me and then down at the folders. Inside was a petition for dissolution of marriage with motion for temporary exclusive possession of the marital apartment and temporary financial restraining orders. The first hearing was listed for County Family Court, August 11th, 2026, at 9:30 a.m. The evidence list was clipped behind the first pages. Cassia's forwarded Willowmere hotel confirmation, the late checkout, the parking validation, her statement from the restaurant, Matteo's written notes after the double date, screenshots where I called him a dependent, a third kid, and a grown man I had to manage. Roman's message from after the restaurant, where he said we should avoid written details. I read the first page twice. Then I put the envelope against my chest because my hands needed somewhere to go. I told Nora this was a private marriage issue. She did not argue. She only took the parent files from my hand and said the morning interviews would be reassigned. Roman sent one message before noon. He said he could not be involved in legal or marital fallout, and Cassia and the children came first. I moved into a short-term rental above a bakery where the ovens started before sunrise. The temporary order froze joint spending above a set limit until the hearing. Cassia left every shared group chat, and Nora stopped eating lunch in my office. Roman blocked me after Cassia posted one calm anniversary photo with no caption. The school placed me on administrative leave while parent complaints were reviewed. The thing is, I thought refusing to mother a man would save me from becoming my mother. Of course, I did not see that I had taken the man who cared for me and made him prove he was not a child. 2 plates, 1 napkin. No one left to feed. The laminated kids' menu stayed folded in my work tote. The smallest thing on the table became the thing that named me.